Hey, hi everyone. How are you? Welcome back to another episode of the Cult of Copy Show. It is not Thursday. We had some technical difficulties yesterday with inclement weather, which you would never know, judging by what a lovely day it is today. You can see my glasses are fogging up. Um, it's because I lead a life of air conditioning. Uh, we had a 1 day delay, like I said, because of inclement weather, but I'm happy to be here with you today. Our usual director, Zane, could not be with us again because he's a very important person who has very important things to do, unlike me, who I have all afternoon to goof off and hang out with you guys. So if you watched last week, you know that today's episode is going to be a continuation of last week's, where we discuss 13 negative emotions and how to use them to manipulate people to get what you want. We are going to just pick up where we left off. And we're going to do that in a minute. I'm going to go through the usual spiel. If you're unfamiliar with me or my group, my name is Colin Terrio. I am the founder and I guess you would say leader of a group called the Cult of Copy. We have nearly 12,000 members. We're available on Facebook. If you go to the URL below my name here, Cult of Copy. Wow, I don't know how that happened, but I feel like we crashed it. That's what it looked like happened on my end anyway. Give me 1 second. We'll see. I don't know what this actually does to an episode. Pardon me while I deal with these technical difficulties. That's, of course, this kind of thing's going to happen when Zane isn't here, our intrepid director. Boom, there we go. I got my little lower third back so people know who I am and what this is all about. So back to what we were saying, I forgot to mention this last week, and I wanted to point out that even though we're talking about these negative emotions and how to use them to manipulate people, we are talking about positive and beneficial ways to help not only get them to do what we want, but help give some resolution to those negative emotions so they feel better. But we're also going to talk about ways they can be used to actually make those negative emotions worse, or make them more intense, or satisfy those negative emotions in a not so positive way. But part of the reason we'll talk about that is so you can be aware of it and maybe prevent it being used on you. But also, hey, we're a cult. We don't pass any judgments. If you want to be a bad person, that's on you. We are not saying to do any of these things. The show is for entertainment purposes only. Use anything we talk about herein at your own risk. So now that we've had our technical difficulty, hopefully we are all done with that. And we are going to jump on and get right into it. This week's beer is Blind Pirate Double India Pale Ale from Monday Night Brewing. They're, I think they're here in Atlanta, actually. Yep. Brewed and bottled by Monday Night Brewing in Atlanta, Georgia. So they're local to me. Check them out if you want to. I quite like them. I like this one, and they have another one called Fu Man Brew that I'm a fan of. Enough beer talk for the week. Let's get down to business. So we left off, I believe, on the negative emotion. We did vengeance. So I think the next one here is domination. Now, the trick with domination is just like we're talking about doing to other people, sort of taking control of what they want to do and sort of pushing them to do what we want to do. That's sort of an emotion that a lot of people have. They want this sense of control, the sense of power over their own life, but by means of controlling the other people in their life, if that makes sense. So it's not just like I want to feel in control of my own decisions. It's that I get satisfaction out of dominating other people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in like a sadistic or evil way. Some people like to be the boss, or like to be like the dad of a situation. Like I've worked with people where the boss likes to be the boss. He likes being in charge. He's not a jerk about it or anything, but he definitely likes fulfilling that role. He likes being in charge of other people and being able to just flex a little bit and get people to do what he wants out of, being in charge of signing people's paychecks, I guess. So one of the ways that you can take this emotion of domination, this desire for domination, and flip it to get people to sort of come along with what you want them to do and how to reinforce their understanding that you get where they're coming from, is you position whatever it is you want them to do as a way to either gain or maintain a sense of control over whatever situation it is and the people that are around them, right? Whether that means it just reinforces their role as a leader or an authority in a way that they want, or you actually are giving them tools. You're presenting whatever it is that you want to give them as tools that will help them retain or build this ability to control other people. Sort of like, I guess, my pitch in getting people to listen to this episode of the show. I'm telling you, you can use negative emotions to get people to do what you want. That's sort of appealing to people's sense of control and their desire to want to dominate other people in their life. Even if it's nice, even if it's for nice reasons, it's still a thing, right? Confidence is really what this emotion is about. People want to feel in control because that's where their self-confidence is coming from for that particular type of person. So that's why they want to maintain that state, because it's what they for. It's what they feel makes them a valuable, worthwhile person, I guess you can say. So if their sense of confidence comes from this sense of control, you can play with that, and this person has this desire for dominating the people around them. You can play with that loss of control and that loss of confidence. That's really the negative emotion that you can tickle, that's associated with the primary negative emotion, to sort of engage that sense like, oh, I want to retain dominance over this situation, so I better do whatever this guy is asking, because I will totally lose my self-confidence and I won't know my place in the world if I'm not in charge of everyone, right? The super positive way, if you want to fulfill somebody's desire for dominance and self-control, the positive way to present that, to give that to someone, is to give them a sense of mastery. I've even done a whole training on the concept of mastery, how people can present themselves as a master of a particular niche or industry, for example. this idea of mastery is, I guess it's the nice way to say domination, because when you say I'm going to make you a master, that means you're better than all the competitors, you're smarter than all the customers and prospects, you're just better than everybody, right? It taps into that sense of superiority, and it has some engagement with that idea of dominance. You just dominate. People are willing to see you as above and beyond, just because you're an obvious master. If there's something about what you're offering that portrays that, you can tap into that. And in a weird way, I know it sounds stupid, but the commercial that comes to mind is that Dos Equis campaign with the most interesting man in the world that everyone wants to be like, right? Because he soaks them. That's a dominant figure. He's very old school, very man's man kind of thing, right? So they're tapping into that desire for dominance of the situation, dominance of the social sphere, I guess. And it's silly, it's tongue in cheek, but that is what they are referencing to sell you, middle of the road Mexican beer. It's pretty good. I mean, I like it better than Corona, but it is Dos Equis. It's not the fanciest of beers. It's no king of beers, I'll tell you that. But that would be a popular example of using this idea of dominance to sort of get at people in a positive way. The negative way to appease dominance is to somehow position whatever it is you want them to do in a way that will give them more power, in a way that makes the people they want power over weaker somehow. It subjugates them. It makes people subservient to them somehow. I sort of missed the whole window of not knowing there was such a thing as pickup artistry in the times of my life that I was single. But through my work doing copywriting and persuasion and things, I've come across it a lot. And that's something you see a lot, is that idea of appeasing like someone's desire to be dominant by promising to make other people subservient to them. So it's not really like we're giving you any ability. It's that we're going to break down these other people on your behalf. And that's sort of what I'm getting at. The negative way to appease this emotion is to stoke it even further. And you can get people to do some, I don't want to say bad things, but like very drastic things. This is something for people who have that sense of dominance and that idea of other people becoming somehow more subservient or willing to just give in to that dominance to them. They'll pay a lot of money for that kind of thing. Freakier alternative lifestyle type stuff comes to mind also, where you actually get into, like I guess you would call it sexual dominance and submissiveness. There's whole markets for that. Obviously, the psychology exists, and it exists at a very high earning level, high achieving level, let's say, because I think there is something to the idea that it's part of the psychology of leadership is this pleasure that you get from dominance in some kind of way. And like I said, many people are totally benevolent with that dominance, and they do only good things. They don't mistreat people, but they do enforce their will, and they do it in a strict way, and it turns out to be good for everybody. But it is this measure of domination. They're not asking politely, hey, everybody, I think it would be a good idea if everyone at work did what I said because I'm the boss. No. They're strict, but they're fair and they're nice and they're polite. So like we said, there's positive and there's negative ways. And the negative way to really drag people in is to appease that sense of dominance with a promise of subservience from people by using or doing whatever it is that you recommend. Oh, and like I said, Zane's not here with us this week. So if I forgot to mention this, please leave any comments, questions, concerns, whatever in the comments on the YouTube player, and I will check them at the middle and at the end of the show, since Zane's not here to throw them up in front of my face like he normally does. Hopefully he'll be back next week, because, man, I hate clicking over to another screen reading. So hard. And I don't mean to minimize what he does. He does awesome work, and I really appreciate it. But I did want to remind you guys of that. If you have questions, comments, anything about what we're talking about today, please leave a comment in the YouTube page, and I will read them periodically throughout the show. All right. After domination, we have self-loathing. This is one that like not a lot of people like to mess with because depression is like a real disease. It's very serious. Not saying anyone should toy with anyone who is depressed. And self-loathing can lead to that. But this idea of self-loathing is also used like very acceptably in like the fields of fashion or weight loss or gosh, anything. Like you even see it in like commercials for household cleaners that you might see during the day where like the wife is like, oh, my house is so dirty, or I can't think of an immediate example. Forgive me, I haven't been watching a lot of daytime TV lately like I normally do. um, I've been hooked on The Blacklist on Netflix, so I've been watching that, and there's no commercials on that. Anyways, I digress. That self-loathing, again, there are positive ways that you can tap into that, and it's very prevalent in a lot of markets where what you're selling to people is something to make them feel better about themselves. And like we said, fashion, jewelry, even clothing, not super fashionable that you would think of, but even just like clothing that fits well. Even like junk food is sold in some way, and we'll talk about that because I believe that taps into like the negative cycle of self-loathing. Health, fitness, like parenthood, kids products are sold in a lot of ways to, make parents like loathe what bad parents they are if they, tap into any of those emotions they might already have. Let's dive down a little deeper to that so you can see what I mean. So to flip self-loathing around, the opposite feeling of self-loathing is like self-pride, being proud of yourself in some way for something, right? So if you really want to flip it around and turn it into a positive emotion and promise to alleviate the pain of that negative emotion with what you're asking them to do, if you think of it as a pendulum, just feeling normal is in the middle and self-loathing is swung into the negative side, right? Well, taking it back to the middle and then swinging it in the opposite direction, that would be self-pride. That would be, you could actually feel proud of yourself instead of hating how disgusting and stupid you are. That can feel alien to people, but it helps perk their interest up because it scratches an itch that they may not necessarily be aware that they have. Now, the bridge to getting people to that idea of like, could I actually be proud of myself instead of hating myself, is you want to give them a sense of fulfillment. And to do that, you give them something they can do that they will actually accomplish and then feel good about themselves. And hopefully that creates like a positive feedback loop, right? So that's why a lot of fitness programs will give you something you can do really quick to see a fast result, to kickstart you into the good positive habits because you start feeling good about yourself. That would be one example of how you use this this idea of fulfillment, giving you a sense of accomplishment, giving you a thing that you can do that automatically generates like a little bit of self-esteem. And you can say, well, you can be proud of that, can't you? And it starts to shift people's estimation of themselves, the way they value themselves from these negative things that are making them upset. And they start to put some of their own stock in themselves into these positive things that they do actually feel good about. That's sort of the way you can take a self-loathing prospect and leverage that negative emotion and pull it into something more positive and get them to do whatever it is that you want them to do. Another positive way you can reinforce it is a lot of times self-loathing comes from like people aren't getting enough appreciation or gratitude, or it's not just attention, but the idea that like, I like you for you. I like what you did there. I like this thing you said, just general appreciation. And that leads people to turn this like internal venom on themselves and say things like, what is it about me? What's wrong with me that people aren't like appreciating anything that I do? Am I just gross? Am I stupid? Am I smelly? Whatever the case may be. So that idea of you're getting people to do things, and you're using that positive cycle to sort of get them a sense of fulfillment, and that's something they can feel proud about, and then you help them eat away at that sense of self-loathing using that. You want to help give them appreciation for who they are, which is why you see like a lot of positive feedback type stuff said very frequently in like fitness videos. Um, but you also want to help them find and sort of extract appreciation from their lives, right? Or promise that in a way, like, oh, your husband's going to hug you extra tight when he sees how great you look after doing the exercises on this video. Your kids are going to respect you when you not only remember their birthday, but you get them this hot toy. That's the number one thing right now. Things like that, where you're promising that thing that they crave that they didn't realize they crave, which is appreciation and confirmation from other people that they even exist and are okay and decent. That kind of thing, right? Because that's how you get stuck in that negative cycle of self-loathing, is by not having that. So by encouraging them with that to pull them out of that state of self-loathing and then feeding it back to them, helping them find it in their own lives, will get them away from that negative emotion. So that's the positive way. Now, what's the negative way? How do we really amplify and make self-loathing worse? Well, the way you do that is you give people a slippery slope of indulgence, and you make it so like the self-loathing is the reason they're going to overindulge, and whatever it is they're overindulging in is why they are self-loathing anyway. This happens in people who like what do they call it, eating your emotions. This one's like obviously really big in weight loss, the self-loathing idea. So like a lot of junk food ads, a lot of candy ads are like about indulging and you deserve it. You had a hard day. And people who feel put upon in general want these little escapes. So that kind of messaging really appeals to them because it gives them a way to give in to that negative behavior that is causing them to be in an out of control state. You can almost think of it as the opposite of dominance, because almost when you're in this self-loathing state, it's a lack of control, whereas dominance is wanting to indulge in that idea of control. So by giving people these excuses, these allowances to give in to the things that are making them loathe themselves, they actually kind of want to, and you make it harder and harder for them to say no by giving them sales messages and persuasion tactics to get them to give in and indulge it and go deeper and deeper, which it sounds terrible, but you see this again a lot in junk food ads. Not that I would know, but I imagine this is how drug dealers operate a lot of the time. Especially like the casual ones that are your friends. Maybe you see them a lot in social circumstances, and they're always encouraging you to go a little bit further, do a little bit more, blah, blah, blah. That's the really negative way you can really feed self-loathing, and not going to end up with people in good shape. That's not something I recommend. But again, the reason I'm pointing these things out is maybe you're in a situation where someone might be tugging at your self-loathing in that way, and now you recognize it and can maybe resist it a little. Next, we have fear. Fear, good old negative emotion called fear. Everyone knows what fear is. Everyone understands it. We're all afraid of something. The trick with using fear is that you acknowledge it exists, that, yeah, I get it. You don't want to talk about it, but I can tell you're afraid. But then you pivot to make it so that even the smartest, strongest person would be afraid in that situation, right? And what you're promising is to ease that fear. You're both acknowledging that it's a legitimate and reasonable people would be afraid, so they're not like a wussy, they're not scaredy cat. Everyone would be afraid in that situation. But what you're going to offer is to ease it and lighten it up somehow, right? The helicopter's flying overhead. Maybe someone fell in the creek. That's usually what it means when I have helicopters hovering over. there are a couple of ways that you can offer this idea of easing the feeling of fear. And really, it comes down to what it is that people are truly afraid of when they're afraid. So what they're afraid of is harm, right? Some kind of harm, damage, pain is going to come to them. They're worried. They're afraid that this eventuality is going to happen, and they're dreading that it's going to happen. So if you can offer whatever it is that you're selling as some measure of protection against that fear, and you see this a lot, like what automatically would come to mind is something like security or insurance, and that's a big obvious one. But you even see it in like toy commercials for kids, where they're like, you can be sure your friends are going to think you're cool if you get this thing, right? Because it's a measure of protection. It's using that inherent fear of being rejected by your friends, or thought to be nerdy or not cool or whatever, and tapping into that and saying, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to be afraid. We're going to ease it because buying this is protection. It's like armor in some kind of way. It defends you against whatever it is you're afraid is going to happen. To take that to a more extreme level, and the really powerful way to engage people's fears, if you can demonstrate that you can completely eliminate whatever it is they're afraid of. You're not just going to protect them against it. You're not just going to mitigate it. You're going to eliminate the possibility from even happening, right? And that's a powerful guarantee for anything you might sell. And a guarantee is actually the way that you can reinforce that to people, is like, if they're afraid of a certain outcome and what you sell or what you want them to do is going to help stop that completely, you put the risk on yourself and offer some kind of guarantee, some kind of promise, some sort of expression that if you're wrong, if it doesn't do that, if they ever have to face that thing that they're afraid of after having trusted you to eliminate it, then you're the one who suffers. If you can express that to them, that you've eliminated it completely, that's something that's really going to pull people very, very strongly. You see this again. A lot of markets use fear explicitly, like preppers, any sort of disaster-based insurance type of thing. Lots of public service announcements, like don't text and drive. That'll use like really strong fear-based provocation to positive end. If you want to take fear and not really treat it or correct it or make it better, but you are willing to make it worse in order to pull people in your direction, you sort of, if you're familiar with my copywriting template and my email writing template, I talk about this there. You create new villains for them to be afraid of. You personify forces that may or may not be conscious and malevolent in a way. So like for internet marketers, a lot of times they'll talk about, oh, Google's out to get you. Like a company with thousands of employees is personally out to get you, as if like the board is meeting and they have a list of names of people that they're out to screw. No, it's really just a bunch of people writing a bunch of code, just trying to do certain things to make a good experience for their users. They don't really have it out for you, but you personify it. You make Google into a villain, into a bad guy, and that really engages people, right? Because it gives them a face in a way to put their fear onto, and you can amplify it. You keep giving them more villains. So I mentioned the prepper market. This is one where you see this being used very, very heavily. So like fear that the dollar is going to collapse, so you better buy a bunch of gold or bitcoins or whatever. You need to stock up on ammunition. You need to dig a crazy basement because the zombie apocalypse is coming with Ebola. All kinds of things are used to tap into that fear. We even had a conversation about it in the cult recently. I want to say it was Scott Smith, maybe? I think that started the thread. I apologize if I got that wrong. Or it might have been Halperin. Anyways, somebody started a thread. Doesn't matter. Somebody started a thread about whether it was ethical or not to tap into this idea of like Ebola fear that's happening right now in the public to sell people things. And like if you're creating villains out of it, if you're saying like this is a conspiracy by the Obama presidency to kill off white people, like that's an extreme example, but I want you to know I'm quoting actual stuff I saw on Facebook because I keep a weird feed. That's the kind of bananas things people are saying, and if you're spreading that kind of thing in order to get people to buy things, I'm not cool with that. It's very villainous. I don't like it. But like I said, there's ways to tap into that fear where if someone's genuinely afraid of something that they really shouldn't be afraid of, but spending a little bit of money is something they are gonna do. They're gonna do it. They're looking for stuff to throw money at that's gonna tell them, look, dude, just don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. Buy this hazmat suit, wear it to work until Ebola is over. Everything's gonna be cool. For some people, the ability to buy that peace of mind is way cheaper and more immediate and effective than actually like the therapy that they would need to get over that fear otherwise, right? It's irrational. When people have irrational fears, if you can help them rationalize a way of not being afraid by buying some little trinket, sure, you're selling them an unnecessary trinket for what is an irrational fear, but to them it's real and it makes them feel a little better. And I think that's okay. But doing this thing where you amplify the negativity by creating new villains that weren't there, agitating people, dividing them, getting them to feel like they're surrounded by enemies, that's some truly dark, like cult leader shit right there. And again, I don't recommend it, but you should be aware that it exists and it works. And sometimes people are even using it against you, so be wary. All right, we're a little bit more than halfway through the show. I guess I did start a little late. I'm going to check the comments real quick, make sure no one has asked anything or said anything, and I'm going to go over there. No one will have, and I'm going to feel dumb. Let's see. Jeremiah Baker says the educators like ITT Tech take advantage of the I could be better. They definitely do, and I think it's funny that you see a lot of those ads on public transportation. That's always amused me, that these like get a degree, in your spare time or night class, whatever, internet-based degree farms usually advertise in the places where you're like on public transport going to what is presumably a crappy job that you hate. So you're sitting there and you're stuck. You're a captive audience and you're going to look at this ad. It's promising you a better life. Trying to get you to think, oh, I'm going to get a better job and maybe I can buy a car and quit riding the train with these weirdos like this bearded guy who keeps staring at people. That's a problem I have because I used to wear sunglasses a lot. And since I got eyeglasses, it feels like sunglasses. So I just feel free to stare at people. And I don't realize that they can see me staring at them. And it makes me uncomfortable. But I just like to check people out. That's how I learn all this weird crap. But anyways, I digress. Those diploma mills are definitely people that tap into. And you see all the angles. Like you could do better for your kids. You could do better for your family. You could do better for you if you're single and pull like better girlfriends if you're making more money. It's really tapping into that mild feeling of self-loathing you may have if you graduated high school, didn't go to college, and find yourself still living in your parents' basement for whatever reason. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't judge. I'm just saying. Next we have covetousness. Covetousness, man, I do love that word. What a great word. Covet. It's very, very old school word. It's in the Bible even. It's one of the commandments. Coveting is basically like when you want the stuff that other people have, right? It's kind of like jealousy, but I feel like it's specifically materialistic. That's maybe not strictly dictionary based, but that's what it feels like to me. When you say you covet something, you want something someone else specifically owns. You're not just like, oh, I wish I had one of those. You're like, I want that one. I want the one he has. the way you can pull people based on that covetousness is if you can promise them a kind of shorting what it is that that other person has. Because mainly when people are in a situation where they're covetous, they feel like it's an unfair advantage that the other person has that allowed them to get what it is that they want, and it's somehow blocked off from them, that they don't have access. So promising a shortcut to getting that thing is really going to appeal to them, because it's going to overcome that feeling that, like, I want what that guy has, but I can't get it because I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, or whatever the case is. Um, Another way to present it is if you can somehow make it that they can swipe attributes that this party who they covet has and can use to their own advantage. An ad that I remember that did this was an ad. I've talked about it before. I think Robert Stooks shared it in the cult ages ago when the group was new. He found it in it wasn't Sky Mall. It was the in-flight magazine for some flight he took. There's one of these Stour, I think it's called, watches, and it was like, if you're a billionaire, stop reading this watch ad. And it was very much about like how to swipe the feeling of envy and covetousness that the reader feels towards these rich dudes and their blinged out fancy watches, and swipe it and apply that to other people. So they're looking at you being like, oh man, what is going on with that guy's watch? It looks amazing and expensive. And it's like your secret that it's not that expensive, wink wink. That one actually also had a bit of vengeance, because they're like, the billionaire is going to see your watch and be like, oh, I was screwed paying 20 grand for my fancy watch when I could have got a $200 Stour watch that's clearly just as good, keeps time and everything, water resistant to 15 yards or whatever. So that concept of being able to swipe the things that they're envious of is valuable, in addition to giving them shortcuts to acquiring those things. Another way you can appease this feeling of covetousness is if you can offer, it's funny because this also applies to that Stour watch ad, is if you can offer a simulation of some kind to say, like, this thing that you covet you can't have, but this is just as good, maybe even better in some ways. This is like the next best thing. That whole phrase, in fact, that idea that if you can't have this, this is the next best thing, that whole idea is one of simulation. You're simulating something that they covet that they just can't have. So I like to think of the mass market cheap car luxury lines. So like Honda has Acura, Toyota has a Lexus. Like, these are not Rolls Royces, these are not Ferraris, but they're nicer than like a regular Toyota. They're like a fancy Toyota, right? So it's like, if you can't afford a real luxury car, this mid-level luxury car that's like, we put different logos on it and it's made in the same factory or whatever, that's being presented as if it's just as good. And hey, like, I drive a 13-year-old station wagon with no air conditioning. I don't give a shit about cars. But that appeal, that idea that, like, I deserve this nice thing that other people have, these fancy cars, like, I'd feel better about myself if I had that. You can have that at a price that is not exorbitantly expensive, but is just at the high end of maybe what you can afford. It's just as good. If you can't have the Rolls, you can have the Lexus or the Escalade or whatever the case is. That is a way to take that covetousness and sort of flip it into something positive, maybe give them something more within their means to make them feel satisfied, instead of coveting what they can't have, which can make people miserable. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you want to go the negative way and make the covetousness even worse. How would you do that? You would do it in some way by making victims of the people who have the things that they covet. So if whatever it is that you want people to do has some measure of like sticking it to the man some kind of way, again, to go back to that, like, prepper market has a lot of that. Like, if you're investing in gold and Bitcoins and stuff, because you hate the Fed and the IRS and all of this kind of thing. Like there's a measure of victimizing somehow the people who are going to suffer for believing in those other parties, if that makes sense. So the people who have the things that you wish you had, the fat cats, going to stick it to them by investing in gold, and all their stocks are going to turn worthless when the economy crashes. That would be an example of not fixing their covetousness by satisfying, but only deepening it, only making it so that, no, you have to continue to loathe these people who have the things that you want until a certain thing happens and you get your comeuppance. So much of, I would say, youth-focused, I say fashion, but I don't necessarily mean clothing alone. I mean, like this whole idea of having to keep up with your peer group and what they buy and what they're into, that whole consumer culture focused at youth, is very much about that idea of covetousness, because all the advertising is based on showing you what other people have. No one's ever like, here's the new thing. Would you like it? No one has it yet. It's always like, this is what the cool people already have, and you don't, so you need to go get it. Almost all the advertising in that market is presented in this way to create that desire to covet things, and that's sort of what drives that whole economy. And hey, knock on wood, teenagers spend a lot of their parents' money that the parents wouldn't otherwise spend, and that's why we have all these nice things. So that's covetousness, how to tap into people's desire to want the things that other people have. Next, we have vanity. Vanity is a tricky one because it's really hard to counter, because like what everyone presumes a person who's overly vain needs is to be put in their place, but they don't feel like they deserve it when it happens because they're vain. So it really has no effect. So it can be really tricky to deal with vanity, but it's very, very easy to sell vain people things if you don't mind just keeping them in a state that is negative, which if you consider vanity be negative, it's that. Obviously, it's very easy to prolong people's vanity. But first, let's talk about some ways you can try to help them with it, try to give them some relief from vanity. That's the main problem with vanity, is like no one's like, I wish I was less vain, because you could just do that if you even wanted to. But people who are vain don't want to be less vain. They feel like they deserve to be, vain, basically. I get it. I'm like that myself. So the way you would tap into vanity is to help the person who's vain about some aspect of their life. Maybe they think they're really pretty, right? Maybe they're just like, I'm beautiful, I get everything I want. If you can take that and give them a way to see concise value in particular things. So like, I really think it's your eyes that make you so pretty. That takes it so they don't have this huge sense of superiority, but maybe they start looking around and realizing like, oh, I got pretty eyes, but it puts it on a quantifiable thing. And if, like when you can nail it down deliberately and say, it's your eyes, I think for some people that can take the wind out of their sense of vanity in a way that's positive, because now it's tied to a particular thing, and maybe they know, oh, it's my mother's eyes that I have. So it sort of introduces a way for a little bit of humbleness to get in. But like, for example, if you sell eye makeup, you can see how pivoting that way and making someone take a general sense of egotism and vanity and narrow it down to a specific thing. It doesn't have to be with beauty. It can be with intellect. So you can say, you know why it is that you're so smart compared to other people? That would be a vanity appeal where you're like, well, you have common sense. That would be what I'm talking about, where you like narrow it down and put that sense of greater vague vanity and narrow it down to a specific attribute that you can put that value into, because then they're going to want to like buy things that increase or relate to or improve that attribute, because that justifies them being vain about it, right? They begin to see it as a strength, and people want to build and focus on their strengths naturally. By doing this, what you start to turn their vanity into is validation, because it's tied to an actual positive attribute that is specific, but you're actually nailing it down to what is their best quality. So if you find someone who's very vain about their looks, like we said, and you say, you know what the best feature about you is? It's your eyes. That gives them something that they can actually get validation about, which is a legitimate thing. You know, like they do actually have pretty eyes when, you know, maybe they're not like as hot as they think they are based on their general opinion. But now you give them a sense of validation that that feeling of superiority that they got is earned, but it's actually tied to quantifiable value that you've pointed out to them as, you know, that's better than normal, this one attribute. So it's almost like, if I could try and explain it a better way, if you have a prospect or a mark, someone you want to persuade who you know is vain, it's not just complimenting them in general, but you're trying to narrow it down to a specific attribute that you actually do feel that they have that is superior to other people's. And that can sort of attach their sense of pride and superiority to a real thing that they should actually feel superior about, which means they're willing to invest in it in some kind of way, buying whatever it is that you tell them to or doing what you tell them to. And by doing that investment, it anchors their vanity to something they actually earned and qualify for, if that makes sense. Because I'm fine with people being egotistical about something that is actually better than other people that they may have. So that validation is key there. And what this helps to do over time, and again, it's one of these things where the positive way to flip vanity around is not something you can do immediately, because people don't feel it's something they need to change. It's a negative emotion, but it's not painful for the person who has it. It's painful and annoying to everyone else. But if you want to change it, the trick is you need to give them different perspectives. And by doing these things that I'm talking about, breaking down their overall sense of superiority and tying it to particular things, that opens the door to them, I guess you would call it compartmentalizing everything. So if you're like, you know what's really pretty about you? Your eyes. So now all of a sudden, they're proud of having really pretty eyes, but now maybe they're less thinking like their whole face is a 10, if that makes sense. So it introduces the possibility that, like, you know, oh, well, I don't have the greatest jawline. My eyes are amazing, but, you know, my lips are all right. And again, that's not like you're trying to diminish someone's sense of self in a negative way. But if their vanity is excessive and, you know, hurting them in some way, which a lot of times it does, because people don't want anything to do with people who are shallow and vain, that's a way you can sort of help them along a corrective path, is by altering their perspective. It happens cheesily and very inaccurately in like movies, when the person who's very egotistical and self-involved gets involved in some charitable act, like they inherit a gross dog that they come to love, or like an orphan kid moves in, or some bizarre thing like that, and they come to realize, oh, it's not all about me, it's about other people too, and it's magical, and it happens in an hour and a half, because that's how movies are. It doesn't happen like that in real life. It's a lot more difficult, but it's a similar idea. You need to shift their perspective if you want to alter the sense of vanity. Of all the ones we talked about, this is the one where, like, it's good to be able to know that, to manipulate people who may be vain. Like if you want to get your boss to do what you want to do, or you like to date above your own level, and you want to, you know, appease people with a sense of vanity, but it's hard to capitalize on commercially in a positive way. It's very easy to capitalize on it in a negative way, which is just outright flattery. Yes, you're great. You're beautiful. You're amazing. And that's why you deserve to buy this, because it's the best. Only the best people have it. It's super easy to appeal to vanity when you want to get people to buy things. But like I said, that doesn't fix their vanity. It doesn't improve the world in any way. You're just getting them to indulge, and you're completely giving them everything that they want, which is like, yeah, you're great. You're already great. You're so great. That's why I'm surprised you don't already have this, because everyone who's so great as you should have this, whatever it is. That's the blatant appeal to vanity via flattery. Works like gangbusters, especially for luxury items. We got two more. It looks like we're almost to the end of the show, but I'm going to go a little longer since I didn't get this working and we had that technical difficulty. I'm going to check the comments again real quick to make sure I haven't missed anything. Let's see. Oops. Contractor Coach says it was Mike Halperin that posted ethics question. If you believe that Ebola story is being unduly exploited by fearmongers but had the opportunity to anonymously profit from that, would you? I think the trick there is anonymously. Like, if you have to do it anonymously because you would feel bad if people knew it was you, probably don't do it. Maybe. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I'm not exactly a white hat kind. My hat's gray, actually. I'm not totally evil, but it's not a white hat. Thanks for that clarifying. So if you wanted to find that thread, it was by Mike Halperin, and that was the text there. Ethics question is how it starts. You should be able to find it via search if you are a member of the Cult of Copy. All right, back to our notes here. Two more. Immaturity. Man, it's getting dark. Is it like overcast? Must just be under a cloud. It feels like it got dark all of a sudden. Immaturity. Immaturity is a very popular one. It's used to sell a lot of products, particularly to men. Women have the desire to mature. Men sort of, I don't know if it's an inherent desire and that's why lots of marketing appeals to it, or if it is an inherent desire because lots of marketing appeals to it. This idea of immaturity being something that people possess, and again, it's much like vanity in that, like, if you have that immaturity and you're trying to preserve it, you don't want to get rid of it. So it's not something you're going to be like, oh, I wish I was more mature, but I just can't. Because, like, if you decide to do that, you just do it. The way you leverage that emotion to get people to do things is by not by countering it, because it's not an unpleasant experience, is by lining up what you want with that emotion, with fulfilling that emotion. So a lot of times with this idea of immaturity comes this, like, sarcastic, irreverent kind of voice that, like, oh, we reject authority and we know what's cool, and it's kind of defiant. It's kind of a little bit punk rock. It's a little bit of a rebel. Long has this been used to appeal to that idea of immaturity, because what you're doing is rejecting authority and the idea of older people saying, you know, one day you'll grow up and you'll see. Well, the idea of immaturity, the appeal of that is that I don't ever have to grow up and see. It's going to be just like it is now, and I get to have fun and minimize responsibility and YOLO, all that stuff, right? So by tapping into that idea of irreverence, that whatever it is you want them to do or acquire is going to somehow really get the goat of older, more mature, more knowledgeable people, and show them that you do what you want. You don't do what the status quo is or what, you know, grandpa recommends. You do what's hip and cool and now, because they don't get it, man. That will appeal to people who have that state of immaturity, that negative, it's not really an emotion, but like a status, a concept, a self-concept of, like, I'm younger than I really am, kind of attitude, right? Outside of just that idea of irreverence is hipness or coolness. Now, the trick with this is, like, even things that appeal to, like, older men maybe having like a midlife crisis have this actual appeal to immaturity. But what's hip and cool to an older dude is different than what's going to be hip and cool to, like, a very younger guy who you're appealing to a sense of immaturity. Those aren't going to be the same thing. They're going to be very uncomfortable to cross over. So that's why I separate these two ideas. depending on who it is you're talking to, you want to make it seem like this clinging to this immaturity, this refusal to develop and age and become like older, more fitting archetypes for someone of that particular age. You want to make it so that they're in the cool category of whatever that is, right? So like an older person might want to be in like the George Clooney, elegant, old school Rat Pack kind of tuxedo vibe, right? Silver hair, gentleman of the world kind of appeal. Whereas the younger guy might want like the air plug things and the, I don't know, the crazy beard or whatever it is the hipsters have these days. The appeal of what that means is going to be different, what's hip and what's cool. But when you tie that with that irreverence, which is rejecting what everyone else says you should be doing at that age and tying it to what's cool for people that age wish they could be doing, that's a very powerful persuader if you can portray that image to a particular group that want to line up with it. That's something to show them, that irreverence lined up with hipness. Let's see. A more direct way, and this is one of these, like I wrote this down as like the very positive way that you can tap into this desire for immaturity. It can be used negatively too, because the idea is what immaturity is really about is holding on to youth, even though you're getting older, right? So the negative way to do this is to try and preserve the appearance of youth through artificial means, because that's offering a promise that's just not actually true. You get to look young, but you're not actually young, and it's not the same, right? But you also see in a lot of positive like healthy life choice type things, diets, exercise, really health conscious ideas about eating better and taking better care of yourself, because then you get to retain the experience of youth. But it doesn't mean you have to stay in an immature state. So that's a way you can sort of bring people out of this sense of immaturity, because what they're really clinging to is getting old and decrepit and losing momentum and getting stuck. That's really not what they want. So that's why they rebel against it so hard. And if you can make it so that you connect that idea of becoming more mature, becoming more responsible, becoming the thing that maybe everyone around them wants them to be, without having to give up that youthful energy, that youthful engagement, that youthful even appearance, if it's not like, going under the knife or whatever excessively, that has massive, massive appeal to people, because really that's what they want. They don't want to give up the excitement of youth. They wish they could have that youth as they continue to age and mature and learn more about life. That's just not possible. That's not how it works. So that's the appeal for people that seem to be stuck in the state of immaturity, even though you also get the sense that that particular type of person maybe wishes they could evolve and change and advance, but something's holding them back. That's really what's holding them back, is they don't want to give up the spontaneity and energy of youth. So tie that into their idea of actually maturing the way that they want to. Now, how do you appeal to this sense of immaturity in a negative way? We already mentioned that it's this promise of stasis, because what they are resistant to is change. So if you can promise them in some way that whatever it is you want them to do or buy is going to keep them in that state of whether it's bachelorhood or singlehood or being able to party all night, of being able to avoid adult responsibilities, not get hitched, not have kids, whatever it is that they see as things that would pull them out of their comfortable little bubble of immaturity, you're going to sort of offer them protection from that. You're going to block that out. You're going to let them continue to live in that bubble of immaturity, because you're going to commiserate with it. You're not going to try and make them evolve and grow up and mature and enjoy all that life has to offer. You're going to keep them in their little bubble, and you're going to you're going to continue to maybe even separate them from things that would yank them out of it. So if you were selling a relationship to advice people in that stunted age, it would be about how to keep pulling hot young girls, even though you keep getting older. So older men who read a magazine like Playboy would be who I'm talking about here, because it's like, here's how to make sure you have the cool stereo equipment that the young girls are impressed by, even though you're way older than them. And it continues to put the focus of relationships on short-term physical relationships versus like how to find a wife, how to raise kids. You know what I mean? Like, that is a magazine that is all about stasis and being frozen in a certain place in time as far as maturity level goes. That's what it promises. And, while I'm sure that's fun and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, I say that is the negative way to indulge it, because it lets people continue to be frozen in a place instead of maybe developing in a way that they could. But if that's what you want to do, party on, dude. I'm sure the attitude, you can tell a lot of people are stuck in this immaturity mode, and it would be hard to jar them. The kind of people that it's best, if you want to sell them things, to just indulge them. It's the kind of people who look at more settled, more satisfied people, and they're like, oh, those people are just lying to themselves. It must actually be terrible to be married and have kids. I couldn't stand it. They're just lying. They're lying. They know it's terrible, and they're just jealous. They're jealous of me, my Miata, and my girlfriend with the fake boobs, or whatever the case is. But yeah, that's an audience. And that's how you appeal to them. The last one we're going to talk about, as promised, is somewhat controversial, maybe a little, because most people don't think of it as a negative emotion, and that emotion is love. Most people think of love as a positive emotion, but what I mean when I say it's a negative emotion is that a core element of love is a vulnerability of a kind, because it's very honest and it's very open as far as emotions go. And anytime you're honest and open and giving 100%, you have no defenses up. So it's easy to take advantage of. It's basically the equivalent of like a dog rolling over and showing you its belly. It's like, hey, I'm wide open. That's how much I trust you. The way to appease that feeling of love is to reward it in a sense that it feels satisfying, right? Satisfying that, like, I'm giving you everything. You acknowledge that by both receiving it and saying, yeah, that's great. I love it. I'm taking it all, right? But then reciprocating too, because you're like, oh, well, I'm going to give you everything and hold nothing back. That might seem weird since we're talking about marketing and business relationships, but it has a lot to do with this idea of expectation and delivery. So it's funny to look at Apple, for example, in a post-Steve Jobs world, because I feel like they used to be very good at accepting all of their loyal fans' love and then giving them something back that fulfilled it and exceeded their expectations and blew their mind and made them really feel like that was a kind of weird person to product love relationship, right? Like, that's how you get really, really, really loyal fans, is by basically giving people a thing that they feel like you put all this love into and they love it. And then they want to continue to give you that love, and you just keep reciprocating it with amazing products or support or whatever it is. It's a very love-like relationship, even though we're talking about a commercial kind of relationship. And again, that's the core of it. That's how you create a satisfaction for a feeling of love, or just very strong like that a person might have for your business, is both acknowledging that they're giving to you and you're so grateful and you recognize it and you love it. Thank you so much. Here's everything that we have for you. It's both a reception and a reciprocation. It's funny because this was actually part of the show I was going to do a week ago, but I only saw this post. Caliban Darklock made a post in someone else's group and he was talking about this trick that seduction artists, quote unquote, use based on the way, I guess you would call them naturally sort of dominant people use in relationships. So you sort of observe the way these emotionally dominant and abusive people operate. And this is the trick you can use on people that you're in relationships with in a terrible way. Um, but he pointed out that it has a lot of applications to business, and I tend to agree with that. And it's funny that he made that post like today or yesterday, I think, considering it was already part of the show, which I just didn't get to do last week. So what it is basically you deny them the reciprocation, except when you dictate it. So instead of like they give you all of this love and feeling and positivity, you acknowledge it and accept it all, but you don't reciprocate it then. Instead, you give them their little taste when you feel like it, and you usually give it to them in a way that has nothing to do with what they gave you in a way. So the example he gave is like if just randomly you would give them a compliment that like, you know what I really love about you? The way you pronounce this certain word, let's say. So they love that. You're acknowledging them. You're giving them this love, this little iota of love. And they want that because they've given you theirs. But it's at the wrong time and in the wrong context. So they don't know how to generate that response from you predictably. So what they keep trying to do is escalate more and more and keep dumping more and more love your way, trying to get the little bell to ring. They're trying to push the button and get the response out of you. But you're just like, yep, give it. And then when they're like, oh, I don't have anything else to give, then you're like, bing, it's like that slot machine effect. People keep pulling the lever. You only have to pay out every once in a while. Doesn't have to be predictable. It can be completely random, but it keeps people addicted and it keeps people coming back. They keep putting more and more money in the machine. That's why this is the negative way to tap into love, because a lot of times the giving part of the love equation is involuntary. You can't help it. You're just gushing. You can't hold it back. But the person that is in the recipient position is in total control. The noble thing to do is just be like, I don't feel that way about you, but thank you. The really positive way to deal with it is to be like, yes, we do love it. In fact, here's love back. We love you back. Right? So then it's a circle. But the really evil way to do it is instead of rejecting it altogether is to be like, yep, give it all. No. I'm only going to give you something back when I feel like it. In business contexts, you see this work a lot, and I hate to say it this way, but like most long-term successful scams that take a lot of money from people, and then you're like, why do you keep giving these people money? What is wrong with you? And they're giving you nothing. That's what it has to do with, is that they've been given little cookies, little treats along the way sporadically, and they're like, well, I'm getting something back. I just haven't figured out how to do it predictably, but I know it works. I have evidence that this is working. I'm going to figure it out one day. I'm going to figure it out, and then I'm just going to keep reaping the rewards. But right now, I'm still working the system. That's how people get locked into like MLMs and cults and bad relationships. That's basically what it is, that they feel like outsiders don't get it because the outsider's like, you're getting nothing back. But they've just gotten it in an unpredictable way. So in their mind, they're like, it's possible I'll figure out how to do this the right way and get back all the reward that I've put into it. I've had a little taste. I'm on the edge. I'm just going to give them a little bit more and then it's going to work. Doesn't work that way, but can be, again, very, very, very powerful. I feel like Apple's the one I mentioned at the beginning of the example. I feel like Apple has been testing. They've been testing people. It's not quite right. People who are hardcore fans of theirs are not fully on board with the new stuff. They've had a couple of drop balls. They've flubbed it a few times in ways that everyone will I don't know if it's accurate, but they're like, Steve wouldn't have done that. Steve wouldn't have messed up that way. Feeds would have worked on launch day. Steve would have been here. Steve would have innovated, not just like added stuff that other phones already have. Steve would have released an iOS that would have crashed all these old phones. Stuff like that. People are going to have a lot of bad things to say about it. Time will tell how long hardcore Apple addicts, as an example, will be apologetic about the brand. And what's funny about Apple as a company is this happened before when they had their initial dip, when they got rid of Steve and the quality took a nosedive. And people were like, no, they're still awesome. They're great computers. Until Steve came back and was like, hey, iMacs, y'all, iPods, we're going to do this. And their quality did drop a lot, and their market share and their perception, but they did still have loyal fans throughout that, all Stockholmed and stuff, remaining loyal even though they weren't getting back the love that they were clearly dumping into the brand unabashedly. But that's the example I think of. That's all we got for love. Hopefully you see what I meant, that it's a very powerful and positive emotion when you use it correctly. But when you abuse it, which you can do very easily because it's a vulnerable emotion, then it becomes a negative emotion. So be wary. Be wary of people that are doing what I said, the slot machine delivery, where they're saying yes to the recipient part, but not giving anything back except on their own terms when they feel like it. That's the sign of someone who is not actually in a love kind of exchange with you. They're just taking advantage of you, basically. So be wary. That's the end of the show this week. I'm going to go through the little end of the show spiel, and then I'm going to check if we had any last comments or questions. Hopefully Zane will be back next week, and hopefully this show didn't turn out weird because we got booted and then had to jump back on. So I hope it actually shows up as one video. Otherwise, it would be weird. So that's it for this week. Have a great weekend. My name is the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Terrio, leader of the Cult of Copy, which you can join at cultofcopy.com. We are a discussion group for topics much like we talked about this whole hour: persuasion, manipulation, marketing, those kinds of things. Join us if that is your kind of thing. If you like the show, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/cultofcopy. At some far-flung future date, this might actually be an audio podcast too. So if that's the case, subscribe there. We would love it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week for a brand new episode, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here at that same YouTube channel, youtube.com/cultofcopy. Until then, we'll see you inside the cult group or else next week on the show. And check the comments here real quick. Jeremy says, great show. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. And that appears to be it. Thanks for showing up, guys. We appreciate the comments and the interaction. As always, we hope to see you next week. That's it. Shutting down now. That would be a little applause noise if Zane were here, but he's not, so I have to press the button myself. Bye-bye, guys. Have a good one.